Hello, and welcome to a little book bag extra for you today. The book bag that I have selected, the only really significant thing about it is that it's got a goat on it, because a goat is the symbol of the Ticehurst Literary Festival. I think it's something to do with the derivation of the name Ticehurst. It is a wonderful little village in Sussex, a very beautiful setting for a literary festival. And this is the first year, it's the inaugural festival, so began quite small. This is the flyer. As you can see, there's a very merry goat reading a book. The festival is all based in the Bell Inn. A beautiful old pub, very quirky, filled with strange artworks and odd messages dotted around. Their slogan is "The Bell." Apparently, there's probably a story behind that. So it's very individual, very new, and as I say, it's very small to begin with. So I was asked to come along and do an interview. I was not around for the first day, which was this Saturday, 9th of September. Alex Preston kicked everything off. By the time I arrived, you could actually see people clutching copies of his book, Winchelsea. So I gather the event went down very well. That is his book about local pirates in the Sussex area. The Hawkhurst gang were a famous historical band of ne'er-do-wells and desperados smuggling back in the day, and Hawkhurst is very close to Ticehurst. So a local boy with a local story went down very well. Then my good friend Lucy Popescu of the Authors Club interviewed Rebecca Stott about her novel Dark Earth. There were also a children's illustration workshop and a poetry workshop. Sunday kicked off with Jyoti Patel, The Things We Lost. She is the winner of Stormzy's Murky Books New Writers' Prize. I think I was still having breakfast at that point, so I didn't make it. I didn't make it to that event. And I was prepping for Marcel Theroux. I was interviewing Marcel Theroux at 3:00 in the afternoon. All the events take place in the rather wonderful upstairs room of the Bell pub, which was blissfully air conditioned. It was still in the heat wave at the moment. So it was great to be nice and cool and calm in this beautiful upstairs room. I was talking to Marcel about his latest novel. He's written 7, The Sorcerer of Pyongyang, and he had lots of interesting stories to tell about how that book came about. He has made TV documentaries, including travel documentaries. He's a travel writer and indeed son of a very famous travel writer. So all his books show evidence of a great deal of erudition and the fact that he's very well travelled. So he has actually been to North Korea while he was making a programme there. So he had lots of interesting stories to tell about that. Not least that you can't really meet anybody. You know, you can't wander around freely when you're in North Korea. You have minders. But he said some of the most interesting conversations did come with the minders. Whenever you met anybody on the street, everybody carefully vetted, of course, to meet somebody from the BBC or from TV. So they can't really say very much, and they're all pretty terrified. But the minders themselves, you could occasionally get a little bit of a glimmer of, if not humanity particularly, but a glimmer that they knew more than they were telling, and they were fairly, you could glean things from them, he said, if you read between the lines. And he talked about a very amusing evening spent singing karaoke with them. So there are lighter moments, even in Pyongyang. It's a great story, different to his previous books, but I made the point in the interview that all his books are different. He doesn't write the same book twice at all. And it's very thrillery. I said it gave me a bit of a 1984 feeling. Reading it, you're absorbed in this really quite terrifying world, and you can't quite shake it off once the book has ended. Interestingly, every time we kind of reference that this was the first Ticehurst Literary Festival, and should there be more, the audience sort of clapped and hurrahed. So definitely people there want the festival to carry on, and I really hope that it does. We also broadened out the discussion, and I asked Marcel a question that I do ask people in the book bag. I thought it might be interesting to ask him about his book of shame. And he said, as I've mentioned, he's very erudite. He seems to have read an enormous amount. But he said, not so, there are loads and loads of gaps. And he said rather glumly, he was trudging through Middlemarch and not finding it an easy read, and not sure if he would carry on. At which point somebody shouted out something like, "Don't carry on, don't bother." And we then had a little bit of a discussion about other books that people don't read and pretend to have read, and so on. And we talked about that wonderful book, The Magus, and it was rather wonderful. I could see somebody in the back row really nodding enthusiastically when I recommended that he read The Magus. It's very funny when you read the other book I talked a bit about, because this is a terrific thriller, Strange Bodies, terrific sort of philosophical literary thriller, possibly, about Sam Johnson. Dr. Johnson turns up in the body of a modern, this is sort of, I don't know when it's set, but certainly in the 21st century. Dr. Johnson turns up. It's not somebody pretending to be Dr. Johnson, or necessarily somebody who is, mentally disturbed and thinks they're Dr. Johnson. It does really appear to be Dr. Johnson in a modern body, and that's the premise of this book, which is based a lot on Marcel's study of Russian and his travels in Russia. There's a Russian element to what's going on with all of this, and I did get a kind of Magus-like feel about this book, as if it could possibly be an influence, because it completely messes with your mind and changes where you think the story is going. But what often happens when you say to an author, I think you were influenced by, they will say, I've never read that author, I've never read that book. He'd never read The Magus, but I think we've given him the impetus to do so. Whether or not he finishes Middlemarch is a different matter. Maybe he will trudge on, maybe he won't. Anyway, it was a great event, some great audience questions. Marcel, if anybody went to the Port Eliot Literary Festival, will know Marcel used to do the literary quiz and was completely brilliant and fiendish in his questions. So I made the cheeky suggestion that he should come back and do a literary quiz for Ticehurst. They're such good fun. I don't just say that because I was on the winning team for the last one. I'm sure they're just as good fun, even if you're not. So it was a very small festival. It's just 2 days. So two literary events on the first day, not counting the workshop, and 3 talks on Sunday, which was yesterday. So I went to the last one, which was the local poet, very esteemed local poet, Patricia McCarthy. I shouldn't say she's not just a poet for Sussex. She's actually won the National Poetry Competition about 10 years ago. She's written many collections, and this was a pre-launch for her latest collection, which is a pamphlet, but a pretty substantial one, A Ghosting in Ukraine. And the way the event was set up was to read the entirety of the pamphlet with a few supplementary poems and questions by Sue Gaisford, the chair, sort of teasing out some of the themes and asking Patricia a little bit about her life, how she came to start writing, what her influences were, some interesting talk about Rilke, for example, and Akhmatova. And I ended up getting this book, which is Letters to Akhmatova. She did read one of these. So Anna Akhmatova is a big influence on her. She had very interesting things to say about translations of Akhmatova, because apparently Akhmatova, if you can read them in the original, I'm sure Marcel Theroux can, they were Acmeist, I think, Acmeist poetry, which meant, being plain, clear and simple. So not you don't lose too much in translation, was what she seemed to be saying. So I started reading this and very much looking forward to carrying on with that. I won't be like Marcel with Middlemarch. It's a splendid book, I think. So with that done, that was the end of the festival. The organiser, Rosalind Upton, looked very relieved at that point that it had all gone so well. And as I say, any time there was any mention of it coming back again next year, people look very enthusiastic. So I really hope that it does. We all repaired to the Garden of the Bell for a hearty repast, and that was lovely too. They have a visiting cat that kind of begs remorselessly from any table where fish is being served, but that just adds to the charm of everything. So I do hope this festival carries on. It's very charming, and I do hope I'll be invited next year. Hint, hint, Rosalind, pick me, pick me. Thanks very much for watching and listening, and I will see you again soon with another author interview. Thanks. Bye.